Right now, the front has collapsed, the USSR is rushing forward, and 3 more settlements have been liberated. The Russians are fleeing, abandoning everything, with enemy losses in the thousands over the past week. This is a catastrophe for Putin's army. Details in our report. Watch until the end. Trump strikes the Kremlin without mercy. While Putin pretends that sanctions don't bother him, Moscow is in a panic, sending its negotiator to beg Washington for concessions. It seems the Kremlin is crumbling under the blow of US sanctions. The world is in shock. Ukraine has surpassed leading countries in weapons production. A super powerful techno army is already accomplishing the impossible. Ukrainian military innovations are turning the tide of the war. Ukraine's latest technology has stunned everyone. The Caucasus is challenging the Kremlin. Armenia is turning its back on Moscow and heading toward Europe. The EU is already rolling out the red carpet. And Russia, furious, is losing yet another ally. The Kremlin did not expect such a blow. Putin needs new personnel. Let's cut to the chase. The Kremlin is tearing its army apart and throwing green conscripts straight into the meat grinder. Traps, deception, deadly orders. A real catastrophe is unfolding in Russia right now. All the details of the Kremlin's terrifying schemes, its henchmen, and Putin's generals. Stay tuned for more. Czechia's shock is bursting into the war with Russia. The launch of joint production of deadly weapons with Ukraine has already begun. This isn't just aid, it's a true strategic breakthrough that could bury all of the Kremlin's plans. All of this and more in our program Hotspot. Meanwhile, the front is blazing for the occupiers. The Ukrainian armed forces are confidently advancing. Ukrainian defenders have wrested 3 more settlements from the enemy's grasp. The occupiers are fleeing in panic. Troops and equipment are burning in cauldrons. Russian losses are colossal, several thousand in just 1 week. For a look at what has happened on and around the front lines recently and what's happening right now, watch our report.
The Ukrainian armed forces are advancing on the enemy with 7 league strides, at least by Kremlin standards. Strides. While Putin's army spends months fighting for every village, our defenders are achieving what once seemed impossible. In just 1 day, they managed to take back as many as 3 Ukrainian villages from the Russian army. We're talking about the settlement of Sukitske and 2 more villages in the Pokrovsk direction, Kucheriv Yar and Uyut.
Thus, as of August 21st, 2025, the situation in this area has been stabilized. Control has been restored over 9 settlements. Another 9 have been cleared of enemy sabotage groups. In just the last 10 days, 1,756 enemy soldiers and 75 pieces of equipment have been destroyed here of the enemy.
The occupiers also suffered huge losses in their attempt to break through the Ukrainian front on a neighboring section of the front line. For example, the fighters of the 33rd Brigade repelled a massive mechanized assault near Vladimirka in the Donetsk region. During the battle, the weather conditions were poor, which did not work in the occupiers' favor. At least 3 armored vehicles. The enemy got stuck in the swamp, and as their infantry began to disembark, they were targeted by artillery drones. At some point, even HIMARS joined in to repel the Russian attack. As a result of the battle, the enemy lost 3 armored vehicles destroyed, 3 drowned, and most of their infantry were wiped out. Nevertheless, the Russian army does not give up hope of breaking through our defenses, even on some section of the front at any cost, even if it means hundreds or thousands of dead soldiers.
Every day, basically, there is news that the armed forces have locally pushed the enemy back here or liberated territory there. In all directions, they are essentially repelling some large-scale enemy attacks. Every day, dozens of attacks are carried out in various directions.
The enemy is especially desperate to push the armed forces of Ukraine out of Pokrovsk. Enemy sabotage groups have been storming the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces there around the clock non-stop for the past several days. The situation in this direction remains extremely difficult for the Ukrainian armed forces. However, despite all the efforts of the enemy, our defenders courageously hold the line. Pokrovsk.
The defense of Pokrovsk has been holding for over a year. More than a year, think about it. Well, how many thousands of Russians died there? Losses exceed 200,000. These are the official confirmed losses according to figures from foreign intelligence agencies. Second option, how much Russian equipment? How many Russian generals have been lost in this direction? The generals have lost their ranks.
The Pokrovsk direction is the main topic of conversation for Russian propaganda. But when it comes to their so-called achievements on other parts of the front, Kremlin propaganda tries not to talk about it. On TV across the border, you're unlikely to see footage like this. Within minutes of detection, the border guards from the PLA reconnaissance strike group of the Guard Brigade utterly destroy yet another enemy position. As a result, the occupiers lost at least 2 of their tanks, a vehicle, an antenna, electronic warfare equipment, and a significant portion of their personnel in the southern Slobozhansky direction. Despite all their cunning, the Russians have not managed to achieve a single significant victory, either on the ground or in the air. The only thing the occupiers are good at is creating weapons of mass, civilian terror. A vivid example of this is the barbaric raid on wind turbines near Kramatorsk. These are clearly civilian critical infrastructure facilities. Thus, the Russians destroyed a third wind power station in Kramatorsk. Before this, the occupiers had attacked wind turbines. On October 22nd and 24th, endless air raids on Ukrainian cities may become the Kremlin's new tactic. To this end, Russia is actively testing more and more new types of its own drones. For example, UAVs with a ring wing. An unusual enemy drone was detected by a Ukrainian anti-aircraft drone. Its exact purpose has not yet been determined. However, it is assumed that it could have performed both reconnaissance and strike missions as well. Overall, just in the past week alone, the enemy has sent toward Ukraine at least 1,200 UAVs, dropped more than 1,360 glide bombs, and used over 50 missiles of various types. Every Russian strike is an attempt to inflict as much harm as possible on ordinary life. This week, these are strikes on residential buildings, on our people, on children, and on civilian infrastructure. This is the main target for the Russians. Thousands of strikes with different types of weapons in just 1 week. However, military analysts assure that Ukraine's response to Russian terror is also not far off.
Ukraine was, is, and will be. And sooner or later, Ukrainian tomahawks will inevitably meet Russian decision-making centers. And
while the American tomahawks are still on their way, the security service of Ukraine has shown off some new upgrades of its own. We are handing over
this remarkable Magura B7, which has already achieved a number of victories.
The drone was purchased with donations from Ukrainians as part of a large-scale fundraising campaign. Ukrainian artists, influencers, and athletes also joined the campaign.
This strike by a naval drone is the first in the world to have destroyed aerial targets.
Thanks to just one such naval drone, the occupiers could suffer massive losses, which the security service of Ukraine promises to report on in their upcoming video updates.
In a panic, Trump is pushing things to the limit, and American sanctions are strangling the Kremlin, even though Putin pretends that everything is under control. In a rush, chief negotiator Dmitriev is flying to Washington, trying to cover up the scandal and begging Trump to ease his grip. But the White House is already preparing a new blow against the Kremlin regime. We'll tell you what goes on behind the closed doors of global politics next. The US is imposing sanctions that, according to the Kremlin, are nothing to fear. And Putin's special envoy immediately sets off on an American tour to appease the overseas gentleman. I
believe that Russia, the US, and Ukraine are actually quite close to a diplomatic solution. President Zelensky has taken a big step by acknowledging that this is about the front line.
No matter how much the Russian leadership tries to publicly spin the lie that sanctions are only beneficial for Russia, Donald Trump holds a different opinion, believing that the new sanctions will cause Russia irreparable damage within the next 6 months.
today, Putin stated that Russia is invulnerable to US sanctions and that they will not affect the Russian Federation's economy.
I'm glad he thinks so. That's good. Let's see what happens in 6 months.
Furthermore, according to Donald Trump, due to the sanctions, China is already reducing its purchases of Russian black gold, and India is completely refusing it altogether.
Because of this clause regarding secondary sanctions and without a clear list of legal entities, but for example, in China, they immediately reacted by temporarily suspending purchases of Russian energy resources. Well, of course, most likely they will resume, but one way or another, safe ways to do this will be found. But right now, many are wary of taking such a decisive stand. Trump, who really set his sights, if not on ending the Russian-Ukrainian war, then at least on halting active hostility.
The American sanctions against Russian oil giants Lukoil and Rosneft have stirred things up. The Kremlin's nest of vipers.
The sanctions blow to the Russian Federation is very tangible. The potential impact is very significant. The Kremlin understands this perfectly well, and so does Putin himself. It was obvious from his nervous reaction about the toilets. He tried to make some awkward jokes, but even his clumsy expression gave it away. It was clear that this was a blow to him.
Following Trump's decision to impose sanctions and also cancel the meeting with Putin in Budapest, the Russian dictator tried once again to deceive Trump, all while continuing strikes on civilian targets in Ukraine, on kindergartens, residential buildings, and critical infrastructure facilities. The bunker dweller hypocritically stated that dialogue is better than continuing the war.
He talks about postponing this meeting. What can be said? Dialogue is always better than any kind of confrontation, any disputes, or especially war.
According to the Wall Street Journal, the imposed sanctions are not the strongest possible blow to the Kremlin from the White House. The US president chose a medium level of severity for the sanctions against Russia.
Why did Trump reach a boiling point in his relationship with Putin? The US president was offered 3 options for sanctions after his patience with the Kremlin over the war in Ukraine ran out.
According to the publication, the harshest sanctions option targets Russian industry and the top leadership of the aggressor country. If the Kremlin does not accept Washington's terms in the near future, the US president may continue and intensify the pressure he has begun.
Western media say that the focus should be on the Christmas date in order to, let's say, give a serious boost to the negotiation process and try to stop active hostilities in the Russian-Ukrainian war before Christmas. This window of opportunity exists right now, and both Ukraine and the US are actively working on it. European partners and everyone in the anti-Putin coalition are trying to strengthen Trump, and Trump in turn is being strengthened by the positions of the others. And indeed, there is a chance to suspend hostilities before Christmas.
On October 30th, during his visit to Asia, Trump met with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The White House confirmed that one of the topics of the talks would be the war in Ukraine and Russian energy resources. The outcome of this meeting will determine the future course of negotiations.
Shock, Ukraine is already building the army of the future. Ultra-high-tech drones are rolling off the assembly lines one after another. Aerial and maritime monsters are turning Putin's army to ashes. The world is in shock. Ukraine is breaking into the global leaders in the production of deadly technologies. Watch explosive details right now.
The Ukrainian defense industry is ramping up. Ukraine is becoming a world leader in weapons manufacturing.
Europe must help Ukraine become a steel porcupine that no aggressor can overcome.
The security service of Ukraine has demonstrated new Sea Baby maritime drones which have already been tested in combat. The upgraded babies are capable of traveling over 1,500 kilometers and carrying up to 2 tons of cargo. 2 versions have been presented. One is equipped with a machine gun mount and an automatic target recognition and tracking system. The second is the Grad maritime platform, with a 10-round multiple launch rocket system.
Our drones have changed the balance of power in the Black Sea and have proven their effectiveness. The new generation of Sea Baby is even more effective. Therefore, the work to clear the Black Sea of the Russian fleet will continue in the future.
In addition, the upgraded drones are equipped with reinforced engines and a modern navigation system. Earlier, in June 2025, new models of maritime drones were used during the strike on the Crimean bridge. We
entered by land, entered across the water surface, and in 2025 we went in underwater. There were 2 strikes, each with a force equivalent to 1.1 tons of TNT. As a result, it suffered serious damage. Its key supports, the so-called piers. Essentially, the bridge now operates with a load limit of no more than 5 tons, with only trucks moving across it. The enemy is not conducting any military logistics there.
Ukraine's allies are in no hurry when it comes to supplying long-range missiles that the armed forces of Ukraine could use to destroy legitimate military targets of the occupiers. Deep in the Russian rear.
The story in the Wall Street Journal claiming that the US allegedly approved the use of Ukrainian long-range missiles to strike deep inside Russia. Fake news. The US has nothing to do with these missiles.
Kyiv, for its part, has focused on producing a wide range of its own long-range missiles and drones, which are regularly used to strike Russian territory.
It's turning right now.
I really love this. It just makes me feel so happy. Damn, I mean, that's intense.
Today, Ukraine produces dozens of long-range missiles like the Long Neptune and Fomin every month, as well as thousands of long-range and rocket-powered drones.
In order to somehow bring this war to a stalemate, to shift it, we need to learn not only to repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and their air force. That's why these were needed. And I'm not even mentioning the necessity of striking enterprises of Russia's military-industrial complex and its energy system.
Weapons manufacturers have not forgotten about the Ukrainian goddess of war, Bodana, either. This year, Ukraine became the world leader in the production of self-propelled artillery systems.
Artillery remains the queen, and Ukraine has mastered the production of howitzers.
Despite the role of FPV drones on the front line, artillery has several advantages over drones. First of all, range of engagement. For the Bodana, this figure is 45 kilometers. The shells are inexpensive, immune to radio jamming, and extremely effective against enemy infantry.
The warhead. That is, these are completely different capabilities for striking both personnel and, accordingly, equipment and command posts, constant temporary locations of the enemy. If a drone targets a single objective, meaning a specific serviceman of the occupying army, then accordingly the Bodana self-propelled artillery system is designed to strike area targets. In other words, this is what holds back the so-called local assaults by Russian occupiers.
A prolonged war and defense, it demands quick and effective solutions from Ukrainian military engineers. While the Russian occupiers continue to dream of demilitarization, Ukraine is gradually becoming the world's largest arms forge.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Sensational news. The Caucasus is leaving Russia and heading straight into the arms of the European Union. Moscow is in shock. Yerevan is ready to break the chains of brotherhood and join the EU. The Kremlin is completely losing control over the Caucasus. What lies behind this historic move, and will Putin do anything about it? Find out in our report.
The Armenian government will continue to pursue a pro-European course despite the fact that certain political forces are insisting on closer ties with Russia. This was stated by Armenian Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan in an interview with Deutsche Welle.
Quite a considerable amount of time has elapsed, but the relationship between Azerbaijan and Armenia, I think, is moving in the right direction, on the right track. And there are very serious negotiations underway. And by the beginning of this year, fundamental principled agreement had already been reached. On the main points of the peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia,
Mirzoyan also spoke about negotiations with Azerbaijan and the start of the process to define the general position of the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
And then, in August of this year, at the initiative of President Trump, a meeting was held in Washington between the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia, during which very important documents and declarations were signed, including a document on peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia was initialed.
For the first time in 35 years, Kazakh grain was brought from Azerbaijan to Armenia. President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev also spoke of a positive trend toward peace. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan assured that Armenia is already technically ready to provide transit for cargo trucks through its territory as of today, from Turkey to Azerbaijan and in the opposite direction.
Just yesterday, the leader of Azerbaijan, the head of state of Azerbaijan, announced that Azerbaijan is opening up transit opportunities for Armenia through its territory. And then we became acquainted with the statement from the Armenian side. The leader of Armenia stated that Armenia's territory is also open for transit shipments from various countries. On the territory of Azerbaijan,
The Armenian foreign minister speaks of Russia as the main partner in the economy and trade. But at the same time, the politician points out that there have been many issues on which Armenia and Russia have reached agreements. However, on many other issues, the countries have still not reached a consensus.
Democracy is our choice. We are deepening our relations with the European Union, with the United States of America, that is, with our strategic partners. Cooperation with other countries is our sovereign choice, our decision. So either normal partners respect each other and each other's decisions, or this partnership needs to be renewed. According to
Mararat Mirzayan, even before submitting an official application and receiving a response from the European Union, Armenia has already begun working with it, significantly deepening bilateral relations. In addition, negotiations are underway regarding several new documents. Work on a new partnership program has been completed. It will be signed within the next 3 months.
Shock. Putin demands blood. The Russian army is melting before our eyes, and the Kremlin is ready to do anything. While the generals are looting the army, the Kremlin is sending green conscripts to the front. Watch the following report for an expose on recruitment schemes and deadly traps for new recruits. People.
My fellow countrymen, all of them could still be walking around right now. Talking, doing things. They could have had more children, perhaps even several more sons or daughters, if circumstances had allowed. In short, they could have truly, genuinely, and significantly benefited their fellow citizens, neighbors, and the broader community around them.
More than 1 million losses in the Russian army since 2022. Cemeteries are overflowing, contract payments have been reduced, and commanders are stealing the death benefits. Over the past 2 years, the number of contract signings in the Russian Federation has dropped to a minimum. Pokrovsk has been under assault for a year now, with enormous losses being paid as the price. So where do they find new people for Putin's war? A scheme of covert mobilization has been uncovered in Russia. The Russian Ministry of Defense has resorted to extreme measures, sending young people to be slaughtered.
We signed the contract on July 5, 2025, under psychological pressure from Junior Lieutenant Dasha Dorjiev. It was he who intimidated us, saying that if we stayed as conscripts, we would be sent to Kursk. And in Kursk, if conscripts are sent there, only 70% of them return, and 30% die there.
Conscription is a hidden mobilization. Today in Russia, conscripts are becoming a significant force that the authorities are sending into the so-called special military operation.
There are people from my draft, my friends, who were wounded, shell-shocked, or killed. They use blue shrapnel on us.
Cases of conscripts being forced to sign military contracts continue. One of them was Andrei Smirnov.
The 50th Separate Railway Brigade. The brigade declares that it does not want to sign a military contract. If a contract appears with my signature, it would have been signed under psychological or physical pressure or through fraudulent means. On
his bank card, 195,000 rubles were deposited. It turned out that this was the first payment under a contract which, as it turned out, had been drawn up in his name. Smirnov claims that the document itself was handwritten and signed by someone else. Other young men cannot withstand the psychological pressure from their commanders who try to persuade them to agree to go to war instead of returning home to their families.
He said that, as a result, no one would be waiting for me at home, my friends would all disappear. My parents, on the contrary, would just send me off to work. No one would take care of me or really care for me. That I wouldn't matter to anyone, that's how it would be.
They are beaten, deprived of sleep, and cut off from contact with their loved ones. In some cases, those who refused were even shot at with air guns.
Contracts are signed for conscripts without telling them, and they are already formally given rank. Officially, as contract soldiers, they are sent to war. I'm not saying this without evidence. This year there was a big scandal in Chebakul. In the Chelyabinsk region, a well-known military unit where the prosecutor's office itself, under pressure from relatives' appeals, concealed and admitted that there had been falsifications by the command to force conscripts to sign contracts.
Using conscripts allows contract soldiers and mercenaries to be freed up for new offensives.
They're only 18 years old, they have no combat experience, they don't even have any real life experience. How can they help at the front?
There is an unofficial plan in Russian military units to recruit contract soldiers from among the conscripts.
We have evidence of people being put into overheated drying rooms and kept there for a long time until they agreed to sign a contract. People from Kuzbas told me that one conscript managed to resist such pressure and was able not to sign the contract. But at what cost? His femoral head was broken and he was discharged early from the army. So he didn't sign the contract, but he was left disabled. And yet people consider this case a success. These are the kinds of successes we have.
The mother of another Russian conscript said that her son signed a contract for military service. After he was pressured into it,
he explained to me saying, "Mom, I don't even understand myself how it happened. I never wanted to sign a contract."
When he submitted a report refusing the contract, it was not accepted, and they claimed that signing the contract had been voluntary. In Primorsky Krai, when conscripts refuse to sign a contract, other servicemen are set against them, subjecting them to collective punishment.
A conscript was forced to sign a contract through coercion and psychological pressure. The child doesn't want to go, but they will send him to the special military operation. The child is 18 years old. That's all. And he signed it involuntarily. This coercion was against his will. He had no intention and did not want to sign this contract. They told him, "You have no choice. You'll sign it anyway."
The mother didn't know that her son had been taken to war. He thought he would end up in a security unit, but he found himself in Mariupol.
We do not currently know where our son is right now. At this moment, we have several messages, screenshots of conversations with him, audio recordings and video recordings. We also possess conversations in which he clearly confirms that he signed the contract while under pressure and that he did so against his own will.
Right now, conscription into the Russian army is taking place in annexed Crimea.
You are now joining the ranks of the defenders of our motherland. So,
conscripts, both from Russia and from the occupied territories. Already in the first months of service, they are forced to sign a military contract so that there is a legal basis to send them to war. In addition, law enforcement uses conscript soldiers in battalions tasked with shooting down drones.
bro, for example, we're on conscript duty. I'm serving, basically. In Yalta, the guys, conscripts, it seems like 3 of them, 2 were killed and 16 wounded. Just conscripts. Those drones came flying in. And here too, they fly around pretty often, bro. And imagine, the guys are shooting down drones, and they don't get paid a damn thing. Can you believe it? Even though they said, if you shoot down drones, you'll get paid well.
The number of yesterday's conscripts who become contract soldiers and are sent to war is classified according to human rights activists.
About 300,000 people are drafted for compulsory service each year, but even if a third of them sign a contract, that's about 100,000 new contracts. This is a kind of forced recruitment, and it goes on all the time.
The Russian Ministry of Defense, in order to fulfill Putin's orders, is patching up holes at the front with 18-year-old boys. But no one can help them avoid this. After all, Putin isn't even trying to stop the bloody slaughter.
Breaking news. The Czech Republic is launching the production of deadly weapons together with Ukraine. This logistics disrupts Moscow's plans. New factories, new reserves, new opportunities for Ukraine. Europe is restructuring the front right now. This is not just about supplying weapons. It's an apocalyptic breakthrough that could bury the Kremlin's strategic plans. Don't miss the details.
Ukraine and the Czech Republic are creating their own Ramstein. Our country's goal is to deepen this cooperation through the signing of an intergovernmental agreement and a support program for affected enterprises. An industrial Ramstein, noted Oleksiy Sobolev, Ukraine's Minister of Economy, Environment and Agriculture.
Not only the Czech defense industry, but also the country's political leadership at the moment of these so-called technical initiatives is a key element in the material and technical support of Ukraine's defense forces.
The Embassy of the Czech Republic in Kyiv reports that the Czech Republic supports Ukraine's democratic transformation and Euro-Atlantic integration, both in the political sphere and through concrete projects and initiatives. For the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, Ukraine is a priority country for transformational cooperation, a country of special focus within Czech development cooperation, as well as a beneficiary of humanitarian aid.
At present, according to the Czech initiative, around 2 million artillery shells have already been delivered. This has significantly strengthened the position of Ukraine's defense forces both in the moment and in counter-battery warfare, and accordingly, the effectiveness of their firepower. In relation to the Russian occupiers, the Czech side has delivered around 70 tanks for the needs of the armed forces of Ukraine. T-72M1, more than 140 infantry fighting vehicles, multiple launch rocket systems, and accordingly, about 4.5 million rounds of ammunition have been delivered, including artillery shells, systems and rocket projectiles, plus firearms. In
the conditions of the war in Ukraine, 220 Czech companies remain. Also, as part of the cooperation, Ukraine plans to provide the Czech Republic with a list of the industrial equipment needed by enterprises affected by the military actions.
In this country, repairs are carried out on damaged armored vehicles and weapon systems. In addition, there is also the production of artillery shells, primarily of the Soviet caliber 152 millimeters. These are the enterprises that have remained on the territory of the Czech Republic since the days of the Warsaw Pact. And considering that about 70% of the weaponry used by the armed forces of Ukraine is still of Soviet design, this is invaluable assistance from this country.
Within the framework of the Czech initiative, the processes of purchasing and delivering ammunition are being optimized.
The Czech side has provided Ukraine's defense forces with airplanes, helicopters, and accordingly, personnel from the aviation units of its own armed forces. At the moment, the main initiative of the Czech Republic is precisely the creation of so-called coalitions, primarily aimed at improvement, enhancing the capabilities of Ukraine's defense forces in the face of Russian aggression.
The historical memory of the Czech people remembers well the disaster that Russia can bring to foreign lands. That is why the Czechs support Ukraine, which is now fighting the aggressor, preventing the Russians from seizing both their own country and all of Europe.
That's all for now. For more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.